I think that's a new feature that it always makes that announcement, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I'm so, yeah, it's very clear, yeah. So, good morning, everyone. So, today we are on the second part of our weekend retreat, and today we're going to speak about two different meditations which are opening and brightening the mind and showing us our potential for being and living in a much bigger world, because we can open the mind to the way things are. And this morning I'm going to speak about metta, and then in the afternoon I speak about the Buddhanusati, which is recollections of the qualities of the Buddha. And I'm sure most of you have heard about the four Brahma Viharas, which are the four boundless qualities: metta, loving kindness; karuna, compassion; mudita, gladness, or sometimes also translated as sympathetic joy; and upekkha, equanimity. And of those four, metta is actually the foundational quality, the root quality, the basis of all the other Brahmaviharas. And it is because it opens the heart, and it is, in the Metta Sutta, it is depicted as the love which a mother has for her only child, in the sense that she wants to protect the child so that the child might be happy. So that kind of a love, wanting to make sure, that that being has good things in its life, and knowing also, that good things will come if the mind is cultivated in the right direction. And also what's very important about metta is, to understand that it's a product of an alchemical process. So it's a new quality which springs forth from going through the fire and opening to our own internal experiences of, especially of tanha, of craving and thirst, the root of all suffering. The opening to suffering brings metta, brings about metta. And in the beginning of the practice, I totally did not understand that. I just thought this is a really rubbish, this metta practice. This is just like putting a sugar coating on everything, and then just, talking myself into being kind or something. And I had a great aversion against it, and I didn't want to do it, and I thought it's a waste of time, and it's not, it's only for those who can't do insight. And now I understand, that metta is actually the result of insight, and it's sometimes the only way, how we can meet our experience, because sometimes it's so overwhelming that we really can't investigate it, and the only thing we can do is to embrace it. So the, this warm embrace, rather than a kind of cool trying to investigate with a knife of wisdom. It's sometimes the only thing we can do is to just hold it, like you hold, like a crying child. You're not gonna say to the child, stop crying. You have to, you just hold it, and allow it to just, go through the process of coming out at the other end. And that's what true metta is all about, coming out at the other end of understanding one's own inner process, and then automatically we have an understanding also of other people's process. So it's a result or fruit of personal insight into dukkha, not just an intellectual knowledge, not just like, making those sentences, may all beings be happy and all of that, and then just putting that on top of your suffering. That's not what it is. But the practice can show us, can give us a taste. For example, if we use an image, to bring up metta in the heart, when the mind is calm, then it can show us give us a taste of what metta feels like. And then once we have tasted it, we know, which direction we need to look. And so metta, you could say, to put it in a mathematical formula, we could say metta is the result of craving raised to the power of mindfulness, raised to the power of awareness. Satipanya in Pali. So raising it up, raising the craving up by fully and consciously experiencing it and setting it free from the ego. And then the energy transforms through the intensity of the experience. Because the mind adjusts, once it clearly sees that the suffering is the result of holding on, the letting go is the fruit of it. And that formula, I have that actually, it's from the Christian tradition, where it's spoken about agape, which is the Christian equivalent for metta. And they say, eros, which is passionate love, eros raised to the power of gnosis, which is insight, is agape. And that's, metta or agape, that can't come from fear, but only from true acceptance and patience, the very opposite of suppression, the very opposite of turning away. It's the full embracing of it. And in a Christian tradition, they're speaking about, in context of agape and eros transformed, they speak about perfect meekness, which is a bit of an uncool word these days, I'm sure. But what's meant is humility and patience, to have a lot of humility and patience. And in the Christian gospel, is, in that context, spoken about the transformative relationship of Mary Magdalene with Jesus. She was going through that. And then she came out at the other end, as a very powerful teacher. Even, the scriptures haven't really been very helpful in that regard, because that wasn't really allowed to become mainstream knowledge. But nevertheless, we know that through her relationship with him, she went through all of this. And this is, in the Buddhist tradition, there's the Metta Sutta, and how that is defined is one who practices metta, knows the path of peace, knows, that in order to arrive at peace, we have to transform tanha, we have to transform craving. And that's particular, in the practice of the Buddhist path, is particularly important after stream entry. From stream entry up to non-returner, the metta practice is particularly skillful practice then, because then we are really focusing on craving in terms of aversion and desire. And then the metta practice can come in as a support, to give us the capacity to open to our own inner processes much better. And then that translates, of course, in how we relate to others as well. So your metta can really help us to settle the mind, calm the mind, stabilize the mind, and then use that stable, calm mind for insight. So metta, combined, or the Brahma Vihara practices in general, combined with the 7 factors of awakening, that's really a very powerful path. So, where this wanting, yearning energy is slowly transformed and becomes increasingly wider until there's no more separation. No more separation would be, nibbana, be the goal of the practice. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, we are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. That's one way, how we can express the crux of the practice. We are here to awaken from the illusion of our separateness. And, in order to wake up from that, we have to go through the transformation of all emotional and cognitive filters, which are the result of our conditioning, to release those. And it can only really fully happen by consciously experiencing. And when we have a real insight, especially like a transformative deep insight, what we are seeing in such an insight is, how we have always been believing into those filters. And then suddenly, we wake up to it and we see, oh my dear, what did I think here? What did I believe? And then when we can really see that, it drops away. And then there's a bit of a bigger world. And then, those walls or filters, they just drop away as we walk the path. And, the willingness to be with this process, cultivates metta, because the willingness to stay open, we can only do that if we can bring some metta to our own suffering. And definitely not, from becoming more kind of controlling about our mind and about our life, but more open. So separation is not working. We have to allow ourselves to truly be with our inner experience fully. And conserve the juice, conserve the juice in the experience, but transform it, not become a dried up follower of rules who is afraid of life. That doesn't go anywhere. But to have a stable rooting in the present moment, and to have a warm heart which has the tolerance and the acceptance to be with the experience as it is. And then going through this experience into non-separation, to go right through it. And that would be to realize emptiness, realize the process nature of everything, and the ego just dropping away, through allowing to be really like in a washing machine, to be in the turmoil, to be in the chaos, and not press the button, not say stop, in the sense of I want it my way, but doing what we can, to support ourselves so that we can experience the turmoil which is the result of craving, of attachment. And then through seeing that, letting go occurs naturally. And the turmoil starts to slow down, ever more. Because we're no longer going against the flow of life. And that's the only way how the turmoil is going to stop. So name the suffering and work with it, open up to it, and move through it and out of it. That's the only way, And the practice with, with the refugees and the precepts are a foundation for us, to stand on, so that we can actually have the courage and the grounding to allow a process like that to happen. Because in the beginning of the practice, it feels almost counterintuitive, So, and the word apathy, which is the state of not being able to suffer, shutting down, blocking, imploding, getting stuck. And apathy is the refusal to suffer, because the word pathean is a Greek word and means to suffer. And if we put an A in the front, just like in the Pali, it's the negation of that. So apathy is the refusal to suffer. And the price is a shutting down, because the energy gets, kind of stunted, because we are interrupting the flow out of fear, out of fear of having a strong emotional experience, for example. So it's important to have this, to skillfully suffer and observe how that happens, and then through insight moving out of it. That's why the first noble truth is very simple, just there is suffering. It has to be understood. And my first teacher, my second teacher actually, Ajahn Sumedho, was always saying, that means to stand under, to stand close by the suffering and, look at it. And metta can really help us, metta for our own experience, or if we are standing by the suffering of others, that can really help us to have that capacity to do it, to be with it, to understand it. Because all living systems, anything like flowers and animals and human beings, we all have that drive to evolve. And in our case, we are conscious of that that the fulfillment of that drive for us is to wake up from the dream of separation, to really wake up from it and put all of that down. And the Brahma Vihara practices really help us to work together with the insight practices. The insight practices are more a cool cutting through, like Manjushri, Bodhisattva of Buddha wisdom in the Vajrayana is depicted with a flaming sword in his hand. It's just cutting. Or in the Theravada Sariputta, who was famous for his wisdom. And then there's also the more intuitive, warm practices where the Brahmaviharas are central to that. And they are more melting, embracing and melting it down. It's more like a heart practice. Intuitive, and in the Theravada that would be more Mahamoggallana, the other chief disciple. And there's also Arahant Bhikkhunis. The Arahant Bhikkhuni famous for wisdom was Khema, and famous for the more intuitive approach was Upalavanna. So the Buddha has always two main chief disciples. One is more the cool approach, and the other one the warmer approach. And they work both together. And every one of us, we have to know, what our character disposition is. More cool or more warm, or maybe, quite balanced. We find out, and there might also be different phases in our life and practice where different things are in the foreground. And to speak just a little bit about the four Brahma Viharas and how metta fits in, there are those four images of mothers. For example, metta would be the mother, who is like at the I don't know how that it's called, where the baby is sleeping, and just looking on the baby, or holding the baby in her arms, and just the heart opens up like naturally. There's just so much love, and the only thing she wants is to be that, for that baby to be happy. So there are sense of protection. And then karuna or compassion is turning that openness towards the suffering of others. For example, the baby might have an illness and the mother sitting at the bed and trying what she can do to make the baby comfortable. And if she could take on the suffering, she would. So that kind of compassion, wishing the baby to be without suffering. And then the third one, mudita, is opening the heart to the flourishing in the world or the flourishing of others. For example, the child winning a prize in school or at sports and so on, and the mother being really kind of, proud in a heartful way of her child, and really feeling so happy for the success of that being. And then equipoise or upekkha, opening to the heights and to the depths of life, and being able to stay open to it, to be there. Maybe later on when the child is a bit older and then, doesn't want to listen anymore, and the mother understanding, the child has to make its own experiences. Only from its own experiences can it truly learn. And that's often more compared with the love of a grandmother who has seen, everything under the sun already. And she knows, I'm just going to be here, and the child will come back to me when it's ready. So these different kinds of love, and the root of all of them is metta, which is that sense of wanting to protect, wanting to, make sure that that being has what it needs to be happy. And that also includes ourselves. And and the longer we are on the path, the more we understand that happiness isn't the result of turning away and wishing things to be different, but happiness is the result of really opening to the present moment experience and learning from it, seeing more and more the causes and conditions and the connections, how things arise and cease, seeing the conditionality, and seeing also the part in that whole process we are playing, through attachment. And through seeing that really clearly, the process of transformation has its own intelligence. And if our motivation is really clear and strong, then all kinds of things are coming and helping us. A book falls from a bookshelf, somebody calls us, we find a piece of paper with some information on it. The most unusual things can happen to guide us, if we have a real clear and strong motivation. And if we really know where we want to go with this and why we are doing it. And once we have experienced consciously for ourselves the difference between the contracted, grasping mind, which wants something, and the open mind at ease, letting go dawns on us, like, dropping a hot coal. So seeing through the conditioned nature of the mind is really what we are after, if we are after anything. To see the connections of the conditioning process and see that in a bigger and bigger context, and then there's more and more willingness to stay open with the process, because we understand it's not me. It's not me. It's not me doing something wrong or doing something right. It's just like a whole network of conditioning which needs to be understood. And how could we ever understand it if we're not paying attention to it and being really there? And the metta is, that kind of quality which can help us to be there for us and for others. But first, we have to be there for ourselves, because if we can't be there for ourselves, we can't be there for others. That just doesn't work. So, so metta is certainly, not like a sugar coating on top of a scrambled mind. That would be a waste of time, you know. But metta is a result of going through the fire of experiencing one's own mind fully and not shrinking away, and then somehow it just becomes something very different. So I think that's what I wanted to share today. And now we can just have a few minutes break, and then I'm gonna give a guided meditation on metta. Metta in combination with the 7 factors of awakening. Just 2-3 minutes to sit.